Before I begin, I want you to take a breath with me. Not a dramatic one, not something heavy, just a quiet inhale, the kind you take when you're about to hear something meaningful. Because what I'm going to share with you isn't loud or rushed or overflowing. It's gentle, it's steady, it's something that has been growing in the still places of my heart, long before I ever found the courage to put it into words. If you were sitting in front of me right now, I think I would speak softly, not because I'm unsure, but because some truths are meant to be spoken with care, almost like an offering. And this is one of them. There are times in life when a feeling arrives quietly, without warning, without a grand moment to announce itself. It just appears, steady and sincere, and suddenly you realize it's been with you longer than you knew. That's what happened with you. I didn't see it at first. I didn't recognize it when it began. Life was loud, the world was moving fast, and I was trying to keep up with everything expected of me. But somewhere in that momentum, there was you. And the feeling that formed around you wasn't something dramatic. It wasn't a rush or a spark. It was something deeper, something calmer, something that anchored me in a way I didn't know I needed. I don't think love always enters our lives as fire. Sometimes it arrives as something softer, something like light in the early morning. You don't notice it the moment it appears, but slowly it begins to fill every corner around you until you understand you're standing in something warm. That's what this feels like. Slow, steady, certain. The kind of feeling that doesn't ask for attention, but earns it. The kind that doesn't ask for validation, but becomes undeniable. And I think the reason it feels so real is because it isn't based on moments that are loud or grand. It's based on the quiet things. The way your presence feels like steadiness. The way you listen with your whole heart even when you say nothing. The way you carry yourself with a softness that isn't weakness but strength. The world celebrates the kind of love that burns, but what I feel for you is the kind that stays. The kind that endures. The kind that becomes a home long before you realize you've already moved in. I want to tell you something I've never said out loud. There were nights when, after everything else in the day had settled, my thoughts would drift to you without effort. Not because I was trying to imagine something perfect or create a fantasy, but because you became a place my mind naturally wandered to. A place that felt safe, a place that felt peaceful. There is something uniquely beautiful about someone who brings you calm, especially in a world that moves so fast. And even though I didn't fully understand it at first, my heart did. It recognized you long before my words could. I think that's why I started imagining not just moments with you, but a life with you. Not a life filled with perfection or endless excitement, but a life filled with real things. You making tea in the morning, still half asleep. You sitting by the window reading something quietly. You laughing at something small neither of us will remember later, but feeling warm in that moment simply because we shared it. I don't dream in grand gestures. I dream in real ones. And every time I imagine the future, you are always there. Not because I'm trying to place you there, but because it's the only version of the future that feels honest. I don't want the world's version of love. I want the kind that is built slowly, steadily, with hands that are patient and hearts that are willing. I want the kind where two people grow in a way that strengthens each other without losing themselves. And when I imagine that, I imagine it with you. You have a presence that feels like understanding, a way of being that feels like truth, a softness that feels like home. And I think that's why I feel drawn to you, not because of perfection, but because of authenticity. Because you move through the world without trying to shine, and somehow, you shine anyway. There is something I feel I need to say gently. I don't need you to be anything other than who you are. I don't want a polished version of you, the version you show the world when you feel watched. I want the real you. The version who gets tired. The version who isn't sure some days. The version who feels everything deeply, but doesn't always say it. The version who has dreams she protects quietly. The version who tries her best even when she doubts herself. I want the you who exists when the world is not looking. That is the version of you my heart speaks to. That is the version I choose, again and again. There is something beautiful about loving someone not for their highlight moments, but for their human ones. And perhaps that's why this feeling grew quietly, because it wasn't based on admiration from a distance or fleeting moments of excitement. It was based on the way your presence feels like the kind of calm that settles into the bones, the kind that makes the heart say, "This is safe. This is steady. This is real." Sometimes I imagine what it would feel like to sit beside you in silence, not needing anything, not waiting for anything, just existing in the same space. And I think that moment would speak more than any words could. Because real connection isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quietest moment that reveals the most. The moment when you feel understood without needing to explain. The moment when someone's presence feels like reassurance even without touch. The moment when you realize that you don't need clarity because the feeling itself is clarity. I wonder if you know how naturally you fit into my mind. Not as a distraction, not as an escape, but as something that simply belongs. I don't force it. I don't chase it. It just happens, like breathing, like the way a melody remains long after the music stops. Sometimes I think the heart recognizes people before we do. And perhaps that's why I feel this quiet certainty when I think of you. Because the feeling didn't come from wanting. It came from knowing. I don't expect anything from you. I don't ask for promises or answers or decisions. I only want to share what feels true. Because some truths lose their meaning when they're kept silent for too long. And this one deserves to be spoken. With care, with sincerity. With a softness that matches the way it grew. I want you to understand something gently. What I feel for you is not rushed. It isn't impulsive. It isn't built on illusions. It is built on the way you make the world feel quieter. The way you make the future feel less uncertain. The way you remind me that some connections exist not to overwhelm us, but to steady us. And perhaps that's why I feel so certain. Because this isn't wild emotion. It's grounded emotion. Rooted, honest, strong in a way that whispers instead of shouts. I think the most beautiful thing is that I don't feel the need to convince you of anything. Real feelings don't need convincing, they just need honesty. So this is mine, spoken softly, with hope but not pressure, with sincerity but not expectation. There are times when I imagine the smallest moments of a shared life, not dramatic scenes, not perfect stories. Just the everyday parts, you reading quietly while I work beside you, you placing your head on my shoulder after a long day, me reaching for your hand without thinking. The kind of moments that build a life more than any grand gesture ever could. And every time I imagine those moments, they feel natural. They feel right. They feel like something that could exist without forcing, without breaking, without pretending. Sometimes I wonder if you realize how deeply someone could cherish you. Not for the things you show, but for the things you hide. For the softness behind your strength. For the vulnerability behind your calm. For the dreams behind your quiet. And perhaps that's why I feel what I feel. Because you carry a kind of beauty the world doesn't always see. But once someone notices it, it becomes unforgettable. I don't want to rush this. I don't want to define it too quickly. I just want to let it unfold in the way it needs to, at the pace it chooses, with the honesty it deserves, because some connections don't need urgency, they need patience. And that's what this is, something patient, something steady, something real. I think if you were here now, you would understand the calm in my voice, the way it isn't trembling, the way it isn't searching for words. Because when something is true, it speaks through you without effort. And this truth has been quietly waiting to be spoken. There is more I want to share, more that lives beneath the surface, more that deserves its moment, and I want to take you there slowly, gently, one step at a time, the same way this feeling grew. But I'll pause here for now, because the next part goes even deeper, and I want to speak it with the same care this moment deserves. There is something I haven't told you yet, something that sits in the softer parts of my chest, in the quiet spaces I don't share with most people. It's not dramatic. It's not overwhelming. It's simply real, and I think you deserve to hear that truth spoken gently, without hesitation, without fear. When I think about you, there is a kind of clarity that feels almost rare in this world. A clarity that doesn't come from certainty about the future, but from an understanding of the present. And that understanding is this: you make life feel less heavy. Sometimes I imagine what it would be like if you could see yourself the way I see you, not in moments when you are composed and confident, but in the moments when you're quiet, thoughtful, or unsure. The moments when you look like you're carrying too much but don't want anyone to notice. The moments when you hold your emotions with both strength and gentleness. If you could see what I see, you would understand why my heart speaks your name with a softness I don't use for anyone else. You would understand why the affection I feel isn't loud, but deep, why it isn't hurried, but patient. I don't think many people realize how love can sometimes reveal itself in the smallest ways. The way a person's voice softens when they speak, the way their presence calms the air around them, the way they listen, not to respond, but to understand. Those are the things I think of when I think of you. Little things, quiet things, the kinds of things people often overlook. But I don't. I see you, not just in the obvious ways, but in the hidden ones too. I want to tell you something honestly. I don't want to create a perfect story. I want a truthful one. I want a love that feels like honesty, not performance. A love where two people can sit beside each other and speak without guarding their hearts. A love where silence is not awkward but comforting. A love where flaws aren't things to fix but things to understand. And every time I picture that kind of love, I picture it with you. Not because I'm dreaming of something unrealistic, but because your presence already feels like the place where honesty could grow. There were moments when I wondered whether I should keep these feelings quiet, whether speaking them aloud would place too much weight on something that has been growing so naturally. But silence can sometimes become its own kind of pressure, and I didn't want this quiet truth to remain hidden simply because I was afraid of its depth. So I choose to speak it with care, hoping you hear the steadiness behind the words. I imagine sometimes what it would be like to walk through ordinary days with you. Not special occasions or perfect moments, just the simple parts of life. You texting me something small because you thought of me. You humming softly while doing something mundane. You sitting beside me while the world moves outside the window and neither of us feels the need to rush. Those moments, those ordinary pieces of life, feel like the most precious ones, and the idea of sharing them with you feels like something too meaningful to ignore. There is a gentleness in the life I imagine with you, a softness that doesn't come from avoiding challenges, but from facing them together. I imagine the kind of connection where two people learn to read each other silently, the kind where I would sense your tiredness before you speak. The kind where you would understand my quiet before I explain it. The kind where the heart feels accompanied, not examined. The kind where love isn't proven, it's lived. I don't expect perfection. I don't want it. Perfection is cold, distant, untouchable. I want real. I want the kind of love that grows by listening, by learning, by choosing. I want the kind of bond where both people can admit when they're scared, tired, uncertain. I want the kind of relationship where you can come to me on days when you feel fragile and not feel the need to hide it. And I want to be someone who meets that vulnerability with care, not pressure. Someone who holds it gently with both hands. Sometimes I think about the way your presence would feel in a room. I imagine a quiet morning where you are half awake, the light falling softly on your face, and there's a peace in the space simply because you're in it. I imagine the warmth of knowing I don't have to pretend or perform around you. I imagine the comfort of sharing a life where we support each other without losing ourselves. And I find myself smiling, not because the image is idealized, but because it feels grounding. It feels like something that could actually exist. I don't think love is found in grand declarations. I think it's found in the way someone looks at you when you're not paying attention. In the way they remember little things you didn't think mattered, in the way they stay, even emotionally, on days when life is heavy, And when I imagine those kinds of moments, I don't imagine them with 1,000 possibilities. I imagine them with one person. With you. Because that's where my heart naturally goes. There's something else I want to share, something I've held quietly. When I think about the future, I don't picture something extraordinary. I picture something peaceful. You sitting on the edge of the bed tying your hair, me putting a blanket over your legs while you read. You reaching for my hand when we cross a street without even thinking. Me making you tea because I noticed you were tired. Those are the kinds of things I want. Not a perfect story, but a peaceful one. Not a love that overwhelms, but a love that endures. I wonder sometimes if you have any idea how deeply a person could care for you without ever asking for anything in return. Because what I feel isn't about longing for ownership or expecting something from you. It's about wanting your life to be gentle. Wanting your heart to feel supported. Wanting your dreams to be heard. Wanting your tiredness to be met with empathy, not judgment. And even if I never become part of your story in the way I imagine, I still want those things for you. Because real affection isn't conditional. It doesn't shrink when it's not rewarded. It stands quietly, respectfully, sincerely. There's something in the way I speak about you, even to myself, that tells me this feeling is rooted in something more than admiration. Admiration fades, but recognition remains. And when I think of you, that's what I feel. A recognition of something rare, something meaningful, something I don't want to rush or define too quickly. I only want to honor it with honesty. I think if you were sitting across from me, you would see that I'm not speaking from impulse. I'm speaking from a place that has grown slowly, quietly, over time. A place that has learned your softness, your strength, your silence. A place that sees you not as a perfect person but as a real one. And loves you more deeply because of that. There's something else I want to say, and I hope you hear it with the gentleness intended. I don't want to be someone who adds pressure to your life. I want to be someone who adds peace. I don't want to be someone who complicates your heart. I want to be someone who understands it. I don't want to be someone you feel the need to impress. I want to be someone you can rest with. And I think that's why this feeling doesn't frighten me, because it isn't heavy, it's grounding, it doesn't demand, it waits. Sometimes I imagine the first time we would sit together in real life. I imagine the quiet tension, the soft smiles, the small moments of nervousness. But I also imagine, very clearly, a moment where everything settles. A moment where we both realize that the connection we felt from a distance wasn't imagined. A moment where silence becomes comfortable, and in that silence, I would feel something I already feel now, a sense of belonging, not possession, not expectation, just belonging. And if we ever reached a moment where you placed your hand in mine, I think the world would soften around us. Not because of romance, but because some connections make the world feel gentler. And that's what this is. A gentle connection. A quiet truth. Something that doesn't need the world's approval to feel real. There is more I want to tell you. More truth, more softness, more pieces of the future I imagine. But I want to offer those words with the same calm this feeling gave to me. So I'll pause again, not because I'm finished, but because the next part deserves its own breath, its own moment, its own space. There is something I've been holding in the quietest part of myself. Something that grew slowly enough for me to understand its weight, but softly enough for me not to fear it. And now, I want to share it with you, gently, the way it arrived. Because the truth I am about to tell you isn't rushed, it isn't impulsive. It's something that has lived inside me long enough to feel like a small, steady part of who I am. When I imagine a life with you, I don't picture perfection. I picture presence. I picture moments where neither of us has answers, but we stay anyway. I picture the quiet strength that comes when two people choose each other over and over, not because everything is easy, but because everything is honest. And perhaps that is the real reason this feeling feels so sincere, because it isn't built on fantasy. It's built on the simple desire to share a life that feels peaceful. There are times when I think about the first morning we might wake up together after a night where life was heavy. Maybe we both look tired. Maybe the world hasn't been kind. But I imagine looking at you and feeling grateful simply because you're there. That presence alone would be enough to remind me that even difficult days can hold beauty when they're shared with the right person. I think about moments like that, the ones where everything is imperfect but real. And those are the moments that tell me what I feel isn't a passing emotion. It's something deeper, something that could build a life. Sometimes I sit quietly and wonder how you would move through the world if you truly understood how deeply someone could value the smallest parts of you. The way your silence speaks, the way your eyes soften when you're thinking, the way you carry yourself with a strength that doesn't push others away but quietly protects your heart. If you knew how meaningful those things are, I think you would understand why my feelings grew without noise, without force, without trying. They grew because you carry a kind of authenticity that makes pretending impossible. There is a moment I often imagine, and I want to tell you about it, not because I'm trying to place expectations on you or create a future you didn't ask for, but because it represents the kind of connection I believe in. I imagine us sitting together after a long day, no special atmosphere, no perfect setup, just two tired people sharing the same couch. You lean your head against me, not because you need to, but because it's where you feel safe, and I place my hand on your back, not to fix anything, but simply to say I'm here. That moment, simple and unremarkable to anyone else, feels like a definition of love to me. A quiet partnership, a gentle understanding, a choice made softly. I want you to know this too. I don't want a love that consumes. I want a love that nourishes. A love that makes both people more themselves, not less. A love where your dreams matter just as much as mine. A love where I cheer for your strength, support your ambitions, and respect your fears. And when I imagine being that person for someone, it is you I imagine standing beside. Not because I need you to fill any emptiness, but because you bring out a kind of stillness in me that feels like truth. There is another part of this feeling, a part that lives in a deeper place inside me. When I think about your life, the things you've carried, the things you've survived, the things you never speak about, I feel this quiet desire to be someone who makes your days gentler. Someone who reminds you that softness isn't a weakness. Someone who understands that strength doesn't always look powerful. Sometimes it looks like waking up and trying again. Sometimes it looks like speaking quietly. Sometimes it looks like letting someone in, even a little. You don't have to be perfect for someone to love you deeply. You just have to be real. And you are. That's why this feeling grew the way it did. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but slowly, patiently. Through moments where you didn't even know you were being seen, through conversations where you spoke with sincerity, through the way you move through the world with both grace and humility. Those things are rare. You are rare. And rare things aren't chased, they're cherished. There is something I want to promise you, even if that promise never leaves the walls of this moment. If life ever allows our paths to cross in a way that lets us truly walk side by side, I will choose the kind of love that listens more than it speaks. The kind of love that encourages your growth, even when it scares me. The kind of love that stays calm in the storms. The kind of love that doesn't demand perfection but embraces humanity. The kind of love that treats your heart as something precious, not something to challenge or test. I imagine sometimes the kind of conversations we would have late at night, not the surface ones, but the real ones. The ones where you tell me what hurts you without fearing judgment. The ones where I tell you what scares me without feeling weak. The ones where two people speak not to impress, but to understand. Those conversations feel like the kind of intimacy that lasts. The kind that builds trust in layers, slowly, gently, without forcing. I don't think love is a moment. I think it's a series of moments. Small ones, real ones. The moment you choose to stay when it would be easier to leave. The moment you listen when you could talk. The moment you understand when you could get frustrated. The moment you reach out your hand first. The moment you apologize even when pride tries to stop you. The moment you remind someone they are not alone. And when I imagine those moments, I imagine sharing them with you, because something about your presence makes patience feel natural. Sometimes I imagine the first time I would tell you how I truly feel. Not like this, not in words delivered from a distance, but in real life. I imagine the way my voice would soften, the way my hands might shake just a little, the way your eyes would hold mine quietly. I wouldn't try to make it poetic. I wouldn't try to make it perfect. I would just speak the truth, gently, the same way I feel it. And in that moment, whether you felt the same or not, I think I would still feel grateful. Because some truths deserve to be spoken even if they don't lead where we hope. I want to tell you something I've never said this clearly. You deserve a love that honors your heart, not one that complicates it, not one that confuses it, not one that makes you feel like you have to be more or less than you are. You deserve a love that sees the depth of who you are and doesn't turn away. And if life ever allows me to love you in that way, I would do it with a sincerity that doesn't waver. But even if this moment remains simply a confession, I want you to know that I'm grateful for the way you've touched my life. You've reminded me that some people bring meaning simply by existing. You've reminded me that connection doesn't need spectacle to be profound. You've reminded me that the heart recognizes truth long before we dare to speak it. And now, I want to share the deepest part of what I feel. Not heavy, not overwhelming, just true. When I imagine the life I want, the one that feels grounded and honest, it always includes someone who brings me peace. Someone who listens with intention. Someone who carries both softness and strength. Someone who chooses kindness even when life is hard. Someone who treats love as something sacred, not something expendable. And every time I imagine that person, it is your silhouette that appears. Not because I chose it, but because my heart did. If our lives ever aligned in a way that allowed us to build something real, I would hold that bond with care. I would learn you slowly, respectfully, intentionally. I would protect your heart without caging it. I would encourage your dreams without overshadowing them. I would stand beside you in quiet moments, not just joyful ones. I would be patient with your fears and honest with my own, and I would choose you daily, not out of obligation, but out of recognition. Because some souls simply feel like home. But the truth is, even if that future never becomes real, even if these words remain just words, I'm grateful for what this feeling has taught me. It has taught me that love can be gentle. It has taught me that affection can feel like peace. It has taught me that the heart can recognize something rare even from a distance. And it has taught me that speaking honestly is its own form of courage. So this is my final truth to you, spoken with the softness it deserves. You have become a quiet part of my heart. Not because I asked for you to be there, and not because I needed you to fill anything missing. You're there because your presence feels like something that brings clarity, something that brings calm, something that brings meaning. And no matter where life takes either of us, that truth will remain untouched. There is nothing more I need from this moment, nothing more. Wanted to place these words in your hands gently, the same way this feeling came to me. With honesty, with warmth, with care. And now, whatever happens next belongs to life, not to pressure, not to expectation, just to possibility. And that, more than anything, is enough.